And now the world comes to the conclusion that we've been talking about for, well, a year now on this show. The United States simply can't afford its lifestyle. We spend too much as a nation and take in too little. Ratings agency Standard & Poor's is being vilified for simply pointing out the obvious. America, you're living beyond your means. But the White House wants to blame the rating agency for today's market turmoil and its consequences, which could be big. Higher interest rates, slower growth, more uncertainty. And just as the Federal Reserve and the federal government have run out of resources to fight a slowdown, indeed, we may already be in that double-dip recession, this time without shock absorbers. It's time to take our lumps and get realistic. That's my 2 cents. The Dow plunging more than 600 points, closing below 11,000 points, the first time since October 2010. Joining me now to weigh in on today's major market sell-off, Rick Edelman, Chairman and CEO of Edelman Financial Services, Bob O'Brien, a columnist for Barron's, and Dan Mitchell, a senior fellow for the Cato Institute. Before we go there, I want to start with Nicole Petalini. She's been on the floor all day long, experiencing this firsthand. Nicole, what was it like on the floor today?
It was a really tough day here on Wall Street, Jerry. You know, throughout the day, we obviously expected some selling in the morning. We saw the futures. But when they start to accelerate and then those market on close orders pile in and you have hopes of coming up off the lows and maybe seeing some takers, and there are none. It was a sea of red, Jerry. 500 names on the S&P 500, all 500 were red. On the Dow Jones Industrial Average, those 30 names that we follow, all 30 were red. When you see a name like Bank of America down 20%, that hurts. And that's what we saw today. That was the type of day. And we ended at those session lows down 635 points. I think it's our 6th biggest loss of all time in point terms.
Wow, scary stuff. I want to turn to Bob O'Brien now, a longtime market watcher. Bob, I want you to weigh in on this news tonight that the Senate Banking Committee is going to investigate the downgrade of our debt by S&P. What do you say?
Why am I worried that the government is going to fix a problem? Like, all I can think of is Ronald Reagan's, the 7 worst words you could hear is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That doesn't say, however, that S&P, I think, went beyond its mission statement. A, there were some problems with the numbers they were using. B, they seem to be grading what took place in Washington over the last 2 weeks on the process rather than the outcome. And they were giving it style points. It's not the Olympic figure skating competition. We don't get to grade it on whether or not it goes elegantly. It's Washington.
It's always a mess.
It's always inelegant. However, we did get an ugly deal that neither side liked, something that's probably going to act as a further depressive on the market. And I think that's what the market is focusing on, the real impact on the economy, not the fact that S&P somehow or other stood up there with a highlighter and said the economy isn't doing well.
Dan Mitchell, to you just heard Bob O'Brien say he's not buying this S&P downgrade. He thinks it's politically motivated. What do you say? Do we deserve the downgrade?
We definitely deserve a black eye of some kind, and it's not so much because of our current deficit or even our existing national debt. It's the $100 trillion plus of unfunded liabilities for these entitlement programs. America, if we don't change something, will be Greece, whether it's 10 years or 20 years from now. Who knows? That's the problem. The credit rating agencies are simply trying to do a snapshot on where we stand right now, but they don't drive the market. They're just trying to read the market. We have serious troubles in America because government is screwing up, and you have even worse problems in Europe because they've had an extra 20 years of these welfare state policies, and they're in even deeper trouble.
Rick, I want to turn to you now. Tim Geithner, our Treasury Secretary, had something to say on our rival CNBC last night about S&P showing terrible judgment. Listen to this.
The S&P's shown really terrible judgment, and they've handled themselves very poorly, and they've shown a stunning lack of knowledge about basic U.S. fiscal budget math. And I think they drew exactly the wrong conclusion.
So is Tim Geithner's comments, Rick, here, are they just trying to prop up the U.S., or do you think he really believes that S&P doesn't know what it's talking about?
Oh, I think he truly believes what he's saying. My concern is that it's irrelevant whether the S&P did it accurately, inaccurately, timely, or untimely. The issue isn't S&P. Let's not make them center stage. The issue here is the economy. It's the federal deficit and the federal debt. We need to address that instead of arguing over whether we call ourselves AAA rated, AA plus, or something else.
Well, and also just the idea of whether we can grow or not. Nicole, to you were on that floor today. Was anybody looking at stocks in a different way? Were they looking for stocks to buy? Were they actually looking at companies who were growing?
Well, not so much today. A little bit on Friday, though, Jerry. We did see some people moving to consumer stocks, right? You need to have Clorox. You need to use that toothpaste, etc. You also see some people sometimes moving into utilities, right? You have to have light bulbs in your house. You got to have electricity. Sometimes people go back to the basics. We talk about what you need versus what you really want. And sometimes that's the type of move. But when I talk to the traders here, they seem to be in agreement in that every single stock can't be bad, right? S&P 500, all 500 names are red. So there's got to be some winners in there. But you have to have a strong stomach when you see the S&P 500 down 6.6% in just one day. It's really tough to get in there and say, I'm going to be the contrarian and scoop them up, right?
Well, I think those traders, they're all of one mind half of the time. And they all run off onto one side of the ship, and then the ship tips over. I think that a lot of individual investors have a stronger stomach than they do, but that's just me. I want to get back to the sort of the political side of this, because we heard from President Obama today for the first time since news of the downgrade. Here's what the president had to say about how he doesn't need any stinking rating agency.
We didn't need a rating agency to tell us that the gridlock in Washington over the last several months has not been constructive, to say the least. We knew from the outset that a prolonged debate over the debt ceiling, a debate where the threat of default was used as a bargaining chip, could do enormous damage to our economy and the world's.
All right, so Bob, you listen to the president. He does make a good point. It's a democracy after all. We have long debates on these issues. Doesn't that make sense?
Well, Jerry, it's a democracy with 40% plus of the voters who identify themselves as independent. So it's not a two-party system. It's a three-party system. And I think on some level that what's taking place in the markets right now and what S&P sort of personified is something that actually encourages the far right, the Tea Partiers, anybody on the far right, because it helps them make the persuasive argument, look, the Obamacare policies are going to be too expensive, too constrictive on business hiring, and going to continue to depress the labor market. So I think, if anything, what's taking place today on Wall Street is not driving the two sides of Washington together. I think it's polarizing them further.
Dan, what do you say? You agree with that? Are we more polarized today because of what happened in the stock market?
I don't know if it's because of the stock market. It's because we just have a fundamental difference of visions. For 8 years, Bush was a big spender, and then for 2.5 years, Obama's been a big spender. So those two were very much in alignment with each other. But the Tea Party gave us a much more free market, small government-oriented House of Representatives. They passed the only serious plan that anybody's offered in the last several years. That's the Ryan budget. Obama has refused to address anything about entitlements, which I think has been grossly irresponsible. So, yes, there's a big gulf between those two positions. And I think Obama, by coming out today with his repeated calls for more spending, for more class warfare taxes, I think he really deepened the gulf. And I think one of the reasons the market didn't do well is because he basically confirmed that he doesn't have a serious approach to these issues.
Well, the market did start selling off during his comments. All right, we're going to have to go here. Thanks, Nicole. We really appreciate your help tonight. Coming up, Dan, Rick, and Bob are sticking around. More on the major market sell-off today and what it means for your investments. And guess what? There were really some encouraging signs in the market today. What were they? Some answers next. Stay with Fox Business, giving you the power to prosper. World markets heavily shaken today. The Dow free-falling more than 500 points for not the first, but second time in a week. We're back with the very latest. Rick Edelman of Edelman Financial Services, Bob O'Brien from Barron's, and Dan Mitchell from the Cato Institute. I want to start with you, Rick. What are your clients telling you today? What are they saying? Are they worried? Are they nervous? And what advice are you giving them?
The overwhelming majority are expressing a fundamental faith in the economy and in the direction of the markets, and a great many are asking, where should we be investing now? Meaning they want to add to their accounts, which we endorse completely. The markets are ridiculously oversold. This has been political theater with a complete abdication of the focus of what really matters, which is corporate profits. So that's the message we're giving to our clients. We just sent them a very long letter, which we've posted on our website for the public to see. And the real message is, this is political theater. Don't assume that the stock market is going to stay down.
Hey, Rick, we will link to that page on your website, on our website as well, jerrywillis.com, so folks can get a look at it. I've already taken a peek. It's good stuff. Makes a lot of sense. Bob, I want to turn to you. We're talking a lot about S&P.
Yeah.
You have a lot of questions about them. You say if you like Enron, if you like WorldCom, you're going to like Standard & Poor's.
You're going to love these guys. These guys kept gold-plated ratings on Enron until we put a toe tag on it. They kept a gold-plated rating on WorldCom until it wiped out hundreds and thousands of families' fortunes. These are the guys that are essentially responsible, not responsible, but among the many, many, many bad actors in the mortgage securities crisis, these guys were vying for the title of, like, the king of fools. They have made some bad mistakes over the years. I have a feeling that what S&P is trying to do with this is rehabilitate its image. It's more determined to stay ahead of the problem than to be reactive to it. This time, though, it may have moved just a little too proactive.
Too far, too fast. A lot of people criticize it for that. That's true. But I got to tell you, when your GDP, your total economic output, and your debt are equal, it's a problem.
Okay, and here's the question. We don't have a debt problem. We got a growth problem.
And a spending problem.
Grow some jobs, yes. So stop spending, but grow some jobs.
Well, it's a tough thing to do. Dan, I want to turn to you because I think one of the things that's going on in the markets right now that we're not paying attention to that much because we're here in the States and we're focused on our own issues is that Europe is falling apart. Big problems there. The European Central Bank saying that they're going to stand behind, bail out Italian and Spanish bonds, very expensive. What do you make of what's going on there, and how much will it impact us?
I don't know how much it'll impact us because we're in a similar situation. Flight capital is going to continue to come here. But what worries me about Europe, and the lesson we should learn, is a fiscal policy one. They've taxed and spent and borrowed and taxed and spent and borrowed themselves into a fiscal cul-de-sac. And now the European Central Bank is saying, well, we'll buy all the bad debt from Spain and Italy. Well, that's a recipe for monetizing the debt. At some point, the Germans, you would think, are going to say, we're not going to destroy our own economy to bail out our profligate neighbors. To me, Europe is a warning sign. This is where the Bush-Obama policies of bigger government, higher taxes, and more regulations will eventually take America. And I think some of the unease in markets today, yes, it's short-term volatility, uncertainty, but in the long run, as I said before, it's that $100 trillion unfunded liability. That's the sort of Damocles of big government hanging over the economy's neck.
Well, you know, we're seeing riots in London tonight. Frightening stuff over there. I hope it doesn't happen here. Rick, you know, we have so many questions coming in from our viewers, and I wanted you to answer one of them because you have so much experience managing people's money. Tony asks us, what effect will the new credit rating have on consumer interest rates? What do you say?
Probably little to none, and that's because Wall Street is largely discounting this ratings cut. I mean, it went from AAA to AA+. That's the equivalent of going from a perfect 100 to about 98. So it's not having that much of an impact, especially since it's being so hotly contested. I don't think we're going to see a big spike in consumer interest rates as a result of this.
Well, from your lips to God's ear. And, of course, the Treasury selling heavily today, rates coming down, all good news, fingers crossed. Okay, to the AAA panel we have tonight, Dan, Rick, and Bob, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate your time.